Hey, Peyton. Nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time with a quote by Dan Coe, where he writes, "The more informed you feel, the less capable of thinking you become." What does that mean for you when you hear that?
Good to be back, my friend. The quote that first comes to mind when I hear this one is, and I don't remember who said it, man cannot learn that which he thinks he already knows. That our identity and self concept around knowledge and understanding is the greatest impediment we can have to nuanced thinking, to learning, to developing our ways of understanding the world. And our identity around having already figured something out can present an absolute barrier to receiving new information. And a lot of times, what we miss is not that I need to completely do a 180 and disagree with everything I thought yesterday. That's not really what we seem to miss the most when we have a self concept of being quote unquote informed. It's more that our knowledge loses a capacity to gradually accumulate richness when we have this identity. That's the more subtle level on which we truly miss out when we think of ourselves as already possessing all of the as already being informed, quote unquote. And this causes us to cut off different points of view that aren't necessarily something that would have totally caused us to falsify everything that we used to hold on to, but rather it helps us understand the edge cases of when does this apply? When does this not apply? When does this mental model serve us? When does another mental model need to supplement it? When does this prediction hold true versus when are the cases that there's several other factors that actually could overwhelm it and counteract it? When we think of ourselves as informed, we tend to make very, I would say, rigidified judgments about how the world works and how certain things function in ways that can oftentimes become blind to a nuanced and complex reality in which we find ourselves, and an evolving reality in which we find ourselves, where the factors of the field can change, where even the priorities can change and what's needed most can change. And this is where ultimately to possess a living knowledge is to have a useful knowledge that bears fruit. A knowledge that's held as I am informed and these are my narratives can become calcified and dead in a way that doesn't live and flow and breathe and move with the world. And when it doesn't move with the world, and the world moves regardless of whether or not our thoughts move, if our ideas are rigidified and held in this locked in word, put in a sequence and line, and we don't look beyond the story that we feel like we've already figured out, then as the world shifts, as our environments shift, as new information is presented, as evidence arises that could cause our picture to become much better, we blind ourselves to it without realizing that that's what we're doing. And we can feel like we have a sense of superiority and already possessing perfect knowledge all the way. This is an area where self deception is totally rife. And a lot of us can be good at this in some areas, and maybe there's parts of our area of our life where we still have this blindness despite wanting to be better. How do you think about the practice of observing this, the practice of self awareness as it relates to this? How do we continue to cultivate beginner's mind, even in areas where we've spent a lot of time learning? We've read a lot of books, we've listened to a lot of this or a lot of that, and we've actually gone on walks and contemplated this. How do we maintain a livingness to our knowledge rather than a deadness and kind of keep aware of when we have shifted toward the rigid side of the fence?
Question, and thank you for your way to express it previously. It was really well put. And what kind of practices help us with turning our knowledge into a living knowledge? I think it's first accepting that the world is changing. The world is a place which changes and evolves with everything which happens, and history does not crouch. History goes in jumps and leaps forward. So things can change very rapidly. And there was this one guy, maybe it was a physicist, who said, If new facts are presented to me, I change my mind. And, sir, what do you do if you see new facts? So it's about the self realization that humbleness is a precondition to learning new things and taking in new knowledge and new information, integrating it somehow into the ways you previously thought about the world, into mental models which probably hold firm, but maybe need a little tweak, maybe need a little edge case, maybe can become richer when you take a new perspective. So, this is again, you can look at one thing from very different angles. If you look at it from above, you may see circles and a dot. If you look at it from the side, you may see only lines. If you look at it from the other side, it may become something different. So it is also about changing the perspectives you take to enrich the understanding you have of a thing. So it is, like you said, if you self deceive yourself and say, I have understood it all, then it's the illusion of competence. Then you are only in a passive mode where you say, oh, I'm settled. I know how the world works. I don't need to learn anything more. And that's the
Mhm.
point where you stop learning, where you've grown old and where like the world moves ahead of you and you will be the past, at least from your understanding. Yeah, the practice is being aware, cultivating the beginner's mind. Look beyond the stories and also prepare your mind able to change it. It's like, how do we change our minds then? Peyton, what practices are there which helped you to change your mind?
Mm. I think before any practice, we must first have the right mindset. Do you have your ideas or do your ideas have you?
Hmm.
And without this right foundation, you have no chance. None of us have any chance. And so first let's bring some self-awareness. Are any of my opinions accidentally latched on to an identity? And that could be an identity of me being so smart and having so much experience and having read so many books and having thought so much and having had so many conversations and really having thought deeply about this and like holding on to that and gripping it like this rather than holding it with an open palm. Or do we have the mindset of Socrates that I know nothing? Truly, this is the firmest ground that we can stand on, is that we actually have less than 1% of all available knowledge. It's just literally, I've been walking around this earth for 29 years. There's 8 billion people on this earth, and there's been people thinking about stuff for thousands and thousands of years. And there's such a complex universe, and there's so many subjects, and knowledge evolves so much faster. There's more books that are being published this year than I could read in 100 lifetimes. I have such a tiny, tiny, infinitesimal slice of all the available inputs going into my data calculator here that I obviously know nothing, and so does everybody else. We're literally humans. And so start off with some reality about this, that everything should be provisionally held as just our fundamental stance toward knowledge is provisional, everything is loosely held, and I don't possess the final knowledge. Humans will know stuff in 20 years that we don't know now. And that's actually quite an understatement. Like, there's a crazy frontier of knowledge discovery
Yeah.
that is just careening forward like this crazy tsunami of understanding of mathematics, of physics, of biology, of chemistry,
Mhm.
of all of these different subjects that even if I did know everything that humans know today, that's nothing compared to what we will know in a couple of decades. It is amazing how much we are learning as a species. So this is the starting point. And then to discover where within me I need to evolve my knowledge. I need to move forward. I would say a very specific practice that I have is trying to always find blind spots, trying to ask other people for blind spots. And it's a phrase that I throw out a lot. It is a valuable, valuable discovery to find out a blind spot the easy way
Mhm,
A
mhm.
lot of times I find out my blind spots the hard way, and it takes longer. It's a harder thing to clean up, and it hurts more. And so, if we can find out a blind spot for free, it is a gift. It is a gift. And
Mhm,
so, I will ask the wisest people I know for my blind spots. Hey, this is a situation I'm in. This is what I'm thinking, how I'm thinking about it. These are the mental models I'm applying to this. This is how I think they shape out, and which one kind of dominates in this situation or is most applicable. And this is how I'm coming to this conclusion. This is what I have tested. This is what I'm going to test. What are my blind spots? What am I not thinking of? What have you learned in your gut, in your experience that might be useful to recalibrate what I'm thinking I should do or how I'm understanding where I'm at right now? And it's great with mentors. Like this is the best for the stuff that's really complex because good mentors are wise. Good mentors have an intuition calculator that processes 10,000 variables at once that's better trained than my own is because they've been training it for longer with additional situations. Or at least it's just as well trained and it can complement mine with a different angle and set. I also find that the current frontier and obviously future frontiers are really good, of AIs are really good at pointing out my blind spots when I ask sincerely, not when I ask, "Hey, why is my opinion so great?" But actually, like, for example, yesterday, I had a meeting with a leader at my company, and I was talking to him about why intuition is so important when we are trying to read people and when we need to determine who we will hire and who we won't, and when we need to make complex decisions that resist any math equation. And why this is a 10,000 variable calculator and putting one word in front of another in our narratives is a terrible guide to situations like this. And then afterwards, I was on a walk and I was like, hmm, did I overstate that? Do I have a blind spot and I'm putting too much weight in intuition? And so I pop on AI. I'm like, hey, this is my general opinion. I would like to know if there's some things that I'm overlooking and why, how could I, what might I not be seeing about this? And what about this? And what about this? Like, tell me all of the things that really would point in the opposite direction that I would need to make this a more robust opinion. And then it said like, okay, you might be not accurately taking account for the areas that your intuition was wrong in the past. And you might have a greater salience on when your intuition was right and your logical brain was wrong, for example.
mhm,
And this and this and this as like methods of basically holding a flashlight up from another angle
mhm,
on my commonly held opinions and actionable beliefs and being able to sort of give them a nuance and a support therefore from the other side. And AI is really good at this. If we really lay out this is a scaffolding beneath this belief that I'm acting on and this framework that I have, what is it missing? Or what might I not be seeing? Or how might I be wrong about this? Or when might I apply this and actually do it wrongly in a way that will be counterproductive? It's a really good thought partner for that.
mhm.
The last thing I want to ask is so moving into the knowledge tied to identity, how do we watch out for this? I think this is kind of a core element of when we feel informed and we cut ourselves off from learning or applying with nuance or knowing which mental model and which balance applies to this situation in front of us. When we calcify our knowledge with identity, how do we become aware of that? And how do we find flow even in learning, even in knowledge? How does the flow versus freeze apply to the domain of learning and accumulating knowledge and mental models and sense and intuition and judgment and taste?
I would say the balance counts and making space for learning new stuff, making space for becoming more informed and taking in new information and making space for working with only that information which you have previously taken in and thinking for yourself, which is probably the most important piece of the puzzle. And if you overly rely on one of these things, like if you only take in new information, then you become a parrot because you will say, oh, this is his biggest mistake. Doing it like that will go into the history books. And yeah, that's what I read online. And so you will lose your ability to think critically for real. If you only rely on every day looking into your personal source of news, or whatever it may be. It may be the newspaper, may it be Twitter, may it be Telegram, may it be anything else. You will be overly reliant on the thoughts they feed you, and you will lose your control over the things you usually would think if you would loosen this influx of opinion. And therefore, making space for thinking for yourself, maybe just a thinking time, a dedicated hour where you um, only ponder one question,
Especially if you're on a walk.
especially if you're on a walk, because the neuroplastic transmitter stuff is flooding your brain if you move your body as well. And this is also a good opportunity to help your brain change if you move, because it's like, or if you're in love, that also helps. Learning a
Mhm.
language if you're in love with a person of another culture is also a great hack of learning a new language. So thinking for yourself means dedicating time for it, where no information will flood your brain besides the information you see walking through nature, for example. So it is also the balance between active thinking and trying to ponder a question and trying to get to the root of an issue you have through, like, putting the flashlight from different angles on on the same thing, trying to take in new perspectives so you discover your blind spots, and passive consummation of opinion and information, which will probably also just calcify your thinking into the direction of either the algorithm, because the algorithm feeds us all. Every time we open up a social media app, behind it, there are 10,000 people, 100,000 people getting paid to keep you on tied to the screen,
Mhm.
and also tied to the screen so your awareness and your thinking can flood into the people who pay them to keep you stuck there, so they can either convince you of their perspective, convince you of their product, that it's the superior product. They make you the product if you do not think for yourself. And thinking for yourselves require dedicated time and dedicated space. And also via negativa, letting go of stuff, that information, maybe information sources that did not serve you in the past and probably will not serve you in the future neither. So it's about the balance, in my opinion. What would you add, Peyton?
Well, this I have a little bit of a spicy Twitter concept to throw in the mix because what came to me is, okay, given that we'll never have the information, we'll never have everything figured out. Like, doesn't this lead to analysis paralysis? Doesn't this lead to, oh, I don't know anything, so how am I supposed to move forward? And I think this to me is most saliently expressed in something I've seen on Twitter a lot recently where people talk about retard maxing. And
Yeah.
it's about acting knowing that you know nothing, just like moving forward, jumping in the arena. And speaking from experience, you want to only do this in controlled ways with controlled downside. But I would say we don't want to have analysis paralysis. We do want to acknowledge we know nothing, but move, but act, but
Yeah.
move forward because you're not going to analyze
Mm,
yourself into knowing everything either. Like analysis paralysis has a logic that, okay, I know nothing now, therefore I need to think and think and think and just sit on my hands and do nothing and do
mm,
whatever. You're still not going to know anything. Like
and
you're still like
only
you're totally limited. Like we just have these little 3 pounds of meat in our brains, and we a finite lifespan, and we're just primates out here. So just do act, and then your intuition, your gut will develop much more. I also think this okay, what are the antidotes to feeling informed and rigidifying our frameworks of the world? I think it's a lot of the case where we're we're skiing down this mountain and we've skied down the mountains of our thoughts and our mental models and our way of processing reality so many times that there's these ruts that we're skiing in. There's these ruts where something happens and we slide back into these ruts and we're thinking about it in the same way over and over and over. Neurons that fire together wire together. Brains do kind of function like this, where you grease the skids, then you find yourself back in that rut, and then you're riding it again. And then it goes down more, and it's like becomes kind of like the Grand Canyon, where of
mm,
course gravity is going to pull you down there. So how do we shake it up? How do we see things with new eyes? And there's a handful of ways, but just to throw some out that I've found really important in my life, I think walks is the most accessible. Going on walks is really helpful for being able to have new insight. Walks in nature, 10 times better
Mhm.
because there's no straight lines. You're just in this new environment. You can tap into flow more naturally, especially if you're going off trail and you're actually walking across logs and jumping over rocks and doing all this stuff that engages your whole proprioceptive
Mhm.
system. Your entire central nervous system is kind of in flow, in the zone, whatever. You can just shake the snow globe pretty good there.
Mhm.
Also, various forms of altered states that we have. This doesn't have to be just psychedelics. This can be breath work, this can be meditation, this can be a lot of various, frankly, spiritual practices. Even dancing, honestly, can be awesome for
Dancing.
this. And the other ones that are I don't know how often they're mentioned in this context, but learning a new language is extremely helpful for this in my experience. And because you discover that the way that you group concepts in your native language are totally provisional. They're totally arbitrary and they're parochial in a way that you don't actually see or recognize or feel until you need to think in another language, until you need to group concepts and express the movement of reality through an entirely different framework. And then you realize that reality could be understood as verbs as the primary motion and substrates inserted into the verbs, for example. Or my concept of this might, I'm just, where we chop up our conceptual divisions of verbs and nouns in this way in my native tongue. But actually, I could think of, for example, the wind and my breath and a spirit as one concept and one fluid motion. And wow, how that would change
Mm.
my understanding and sense of reality in that way. And there's all these little ways where we think there's one lens, but when we put on a totally different lens, reality can actually like be cut up different. And it actually it not just in the new way that we look at it, but it makes us take a step back and say, the ways that I kind of conceptually think about things is largely shaped by the language that I use. And the language that I use is one of like 100,000 languages that there are. And it's really arbitrary, actually, how I'm applying this conceptual toolkit to chop up reality. And alongside with that is travel. And I think just getting thrown into environments that shake us out of our comfort zone and we know nothing. We have no idea how to put one foot in front of the other or how we're going to get from point A to point B. And we can't even understand the letters that are on this sign, let alone what they say. And we have to like, use sign language to figure out how we're going to get over here. And like we don't know what we can eat and what we can. And it's very helpful for these things when we really are out there and just plopped into an environment where we're a little alien and
Mhm.
we have to figure out how to stomp around. A lot of these things can help us just get a real thorough felt sense that I know nothing and I only have one like I'm trying to see reality through a straw over here and there's so much that I don't know and there's so much that I'll never know even if I spend the rest of my life learning, and so I'm just going to feel my way through the fog and do my best and give myself some grace and hold my opinions with an open palm and remember that I know nothing. These things can be very helpful for that. And I think that's my intention that comes out of this whole conversation is just remember, even in the areas where I want to pretend that I'm very informed, so to speak, remind myself that I do know nothing. I have this tiny little piece of knowledge and I'm trying to cling on to this like handful of water in the middle of the ocean and just have an open palm
Yeah.
and remember that I'm going to make mistakes, that knowledge is always provisional, that knowledge is always partial, and that it's always evolving. And the knowledge that serves me is a living knowledge, not a calcified, I hold on to this, possess this, put this in my pocket, and it's never going to change. And I can hold on to it for security and identity. Let go. Let go and live with knowledge. This is my intention out of all of this. What about you, my friend?
Beautifully put. Thank you very much for that. And I would add that dancing really is one of the most
Yeah.
powerful ways of moving. Walking into nature as well. It helps so much. And the third thing is, as you said, action produces information. And if you If you only think, if you only read, you will not do much. I know how that works. I read a lot and do not do much, but anytime I do, the vast sea of possible ways to do it differently open up. The vast possibilities of approaching it from a new angle opens up. So anytime I poke the system, it moves forward in a world which itself moves, and I move with it. And so you will be more able to make sense of the dynamics of the world if you do something. Because if you do something, then you will get information back. And with this information, is the most recent information you can get. And you can work with that. And you can do another step. And with this step-by-step approach, it's still always pointing back to the agile concepts of the agile framework. And what does it mean to be agile? Yeah, move with grace and action and conviction and making order into chaos. And what is necessary for that? You need to first make it transparent and see what is really there. You need to gain insights. And this is the part where thinking and your capability of thinking really helps to insight into the things you discovered from making it transparent. And with that insight, with your thinking about that, also think about how to do the next step, how to do the next best step, how to do the next best action, which produces the next information, which you will analyze and think about. Only with this loop, it is a good way, not only, but this is a good loop to bring order into chaos, to make sense of a dynamic world. I believe the same way Puma approaches his mice hunts.
He knows nothing.
What? They're talking about me? With that, it's my intention to dance more.
Yes, me too, brother. Me too. Thank you for what you shared. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you too, man. See you next time. Bye,
See you
Peyton.
next time. Bye.